This computer. Uh, Hello, everybody. We're starting actually on time. And hello, Bill and Sue. Oh, good. Oh, good. So everybody, please be muted. And Marilyn, also, please mute yourselves and mute. I muted you, Marilyn. All right. And now I'm going to try to show you, Stephen. Hello, Stephen. I'm going to try to show you my slides. And this gets me nervous, but I'm going to go like this. And will you pray for me, please? Do you see my slides? Tell me, yes, you did. You did. All right. And let me just, and are they big enough?
Yes,
Can
they're
you?
posted.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. So let me say, welcome, everybody. I'm so grateful that you are all here and a lot of good smiles, and I appreciate that. So my Oura Ring, the battery had run out after many years of using it, but it's back. And guess what? Come to find out that when I am, and I'd mentioned this to Kate, when I am either supervising or seeing my patients or teaching, I'm in the restorative mode. And the rest of the time, I am a bit stressed. Now, that does seem, that to me, that seems a little bit interesting that it would be that way. But anyway, I'm teaching now. I'm so glad to have you here, and we're going to get started. Now, what we get to do, I want to try to open, oh, the box is gone. The chat, oh, it's gone. I guess I can't see the chat, but I had it a moment ago. And if somebody, like, I know how to,
Martha, did you press the chat button
yeah, there, I don't see a chat button.
on the bottom?
It's not on the bottom. I had it and then it went. So I recorded this. This is being recorded starting now. Um, and it'll drop down from above. That's where it drops down from, as it turns out. But I can't get it. I mean, ultimately at the end. So let me just say for now, because I might as well move forward here. For now, we are being recorded. Put brief comments, questions, reflections in the chat, please. And, not just brief, like a sentence or two, that are related specifically to what you hear me saying. Then, if we have time at the end, you can ask a broader based one, like, how do you deal with depression? But I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts, your reflections, your comments, questions about the Stark method and how it might be relevant and applicable to you. Good. And Gina, yeah, you can mute yourself again. Okay, good. All right, so here we go. Thank you all for being here. I'm Martha Stark, whatever. Okay, explore the synergy of depth, disruption, and healing. So let's see if this is going to work. Oh, okay, that's me, busy at work on my PowerPoints. Okay, we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how we cope with it, find meaning in it, and move forward with renewed purpose. Although often misattributed to the existential psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, the actual author of this evocative quote is unknown. Between stimulus and response is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. A quote well known probably to most of us. Now, applying this more specifically to the clinical situation and totally relevant for what I'm going to be talking about over the course of the next 2 hours. Between stressor and what follows is a space. And this is going to be relevant moment by moment for all of us as we're living our lives, as I was trying to figure out how the hell to access the chat, and for our patients moment by moment as they sit with us in a session, and for them once they've left the session, how they are managing the stressors in their lives. Fundamentally, I feel that that is what the Stark method's all about. It's also, by the way, I've kind of lifted that both from classical psychoanalysis, where id was, there shall ego be, but also from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, from psychological rigidity to psychological flexibility, and I rename that psychological resilience, from rigidity to resilience. Okay, from defensive reaction to adaptive response. All right. Anyway, so applying Viktor Frankl's quote, between stressor and what follows is a space. We care about that space. In that space is our power, either to react defensively, both words are important, when the stressor is simply too much, always go up on my toes. But if I went up on my toes now, you'd see that I'm wearing my pajamas. So I'm not going to go up on my toes. All right. When the stressor is simply too much for us to manage, which will thwart our growth, or to respond adaptively, when we are more easily able to take that stressor in our stride, which will promote our freedom. Not only do we have the power to choose ultimately, maybe not initially, but as a result of movement in the treatment, deep embodied treatments, ultimately, not only do we have the power to choose how we make meaning of our lives, but we also have the responsibility to do so. It has been suggested that 10% of what happens to us is life, but 90% is how we defensively react or adaptively respond to it. Now, please note that I do not limit defenses to the well-known and more traditional ones: repression, suppression, projection, dissociation, somatization. Rather, I define defenses more broadly as speaking to any of the self-protective processes we mobilize when made anxious in the face of stressors. Stressors are so key here, and how we either react defensively. Oh, it dropped down. Oh, the thing dropped down. I can see oh, it's gone. Okay. Anyway, so whether we react defensively or respond adaptively. What was I saying? All right. Okay. So either we, made anxious, react to the stressor by reflexively defending. So we think of a defensive, mindless reaction, another way to describe it, or we, more resilient, and this is a moment-by-moment thing, respond to the stressor by reflectively adapting. So notice reflexive is more defensive, reflective is more adaptive. Mindless is more defensive, and more mindful is more adaptive. So more resilient, we respond with an adaptive, more mindful response. Life is not about defensively waiting for the storm to pass. And up here in Cambridge, if we were ever busy waiting for the storms to pass, or down in Clearwater Beach waiting for the storms to pass, we would grow old waiting. So rather, adaptively, life is about adaptively learning to dance in the rain. And the theme of dance you're going to see is relevant throughout when I talk later about choreography and talk about the holding as the initial phase, then the provocation as the second phase, and then, thanks to Martha Carr, C-A-R-R, the consolidation as the third phase. But then wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. So we'll get to that later. The holding, the provocation, the consolidation, the holding, the provocation, the consolidation, and these iterative healing cycles of disruption in reaction to stress, challenge, and then repair or recovery or restabilization in response to support, and by tapping in into the underlying resilience of the system. Anyway, I'm leaping ahead of myself. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, and others of you are thinking like, oh my God, and you're talking too fast, and what the hell? But anyway, I know, because I took all the registrations, I know that numbers of you know what I'm talking about, and numbers of you do not so much. Okay, therapeutic modalities, whether long-term or shorter term. This is not just psychoanalytic and that take years. This is whether long-term or shorter term, that have profound and sustained psychodynamic change as their ultimate goal. For example, psychoanalysis and other depth psychologies, the alphabet soup, right? Including but not limited to ACT, IFS, EMDR, ISTDP, AEDP, EFT, NLP, SE, Peter Levine's somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, and psychomotor psychotherapy. So Pat Ogden's and Al Pesso, my dear, dear, dear friend, and may rest in peace, and mentor. Anyway, therapeutic modalities that have deep, sustained change as their ultimate goal must be able, eventually, and graduated, to transform, in the more traditional words of psychoanalysis and ego psychology, low-level defense into higher level defense or more evolved adaptation. So from defense to adaptation. and or we could put it as psychological rigidity into psychological resilience, lifting from ACT, such that the patient, whatever her starting point, whatever her initial level of functionality, whatever her diagnosis, I'm not specifically about diagnosis, and you'll see that as we proceed. So wherever she is, our hope is, wait a minute, I don't need to have that shown again. Okay. Our hope is that the patient will advance a little bit along this continuum from defensive reactivity as being the go-to to a little more adaptive responsivity. And graduate. It's not like they are something at the beginning of treatment and at the end they are, I'll say some big words for you all, but aware, model 1, accepting, model 2, accountable, model 3, accessible, model 4, and acting, model 5. It's not like they get there eventually at the end, but even over the course of the treatment, for there to be a shifting from mindless reactivity to more mindful responsivity, moment by moment. Okay. So anyway, such that the patient will become ever better able over time, it's graduated, incremental, to manage the myriad stressors. Stress is at the heart of this in her life, to which she's being continuously exposed. I mean, I know that for me, not only at the beginning when I couldn't find the chat, and in the moment I can't find it again, but that's a stressor and how you deal with it. And I'm not giving myself a lot of credit for how I handled it, but I seem to be back on track in the moment. Anyway, such that the patient will become ever better able to manage the myriad stressors in her life to which she is being continuously exposed, ever more adept at responding adaptively and mindfully instead of reacting defensively and mindlessly. And a lot of my patients now are sort of getting it. They'll say like, oh my God, I didn't handle it very well. I just kind of knee-jerk reactivity, my conditioned reactivity, my conditioned the way I deal with stuff, which is I don't really deal with stuff. It's more defensive and it's like I don't deal with it. Or, well, I think I handled it well. I processed it, integrated it, and adapted to it. And in that moment, I feel good that I was able to consolidate, thank you, Martha Carr, to consolidate to a slightly more evolved, higher level place. Okay, so here we go. Okay, one of my favorite slides. You guys have seen this, I suppose. I'm never going to eat that much again. That's a mindful response. Versus, oh, look, food. That would be more a mindless reaction. Okay, the relationship between defense and adaptation is a yin-yang relationship, of course. It's these self-protective mechanisms are complementary, not opposing forces. And later, if I dare to, I'm going to mention thesis and antithesis, the dialectical tension between them, and ultimately synthesis, or the idea that every problem holds elements of its solution. Even Freud knew that. Well, Freud knew a lot of things. Freud knew also that. But anyway, so it's not like either or. It's a yin-yang relationship. So furthermore, all defenses have an adaptive component, just as all adaptations serve a defensive function. Nonetheless, and more generally, although defenses might once have been necessary for the patient to survive, as rigid defenses become updated to more resilient adaptations, the patient becomes ever better able to thrive. The therapeutic action is indeed designed to transform rigidity into resilience and surviving into thriving. A dramatic demonstration, I love this, of the direct relationship between resilience and thriving. Decades ago, two obstetricians made an intriguing discovery about the paradoxical relationship between regularity of fetal heart rate and fetal mortality. They discovered counterintuitively that the more metronome-like the heartbeat, lub, dub, lub, dub, the less likely the fetus would be to survive, because that's too rigid. Whereas the greater the heart rate variability, lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub, that's more resilient. The more likely the fetus would be to thrive. So all the way back to way back in the womb. In other words, variability, adaptability, flexibility, and resilience are critically important for the health of both body and mind. The ultimate goal of deep treatments, ever less defensive rigidity, ever more adaptive flexibility or resilience. Notice that the stiffest tree is most easily cracked, while the bamboo or willow survives by bending with the wind. All right, from surviving to thriving. Okay, as we shall see, this is an overview slide. And if I could ask people, a number of you are actually eating while we're talking here. If you could maybe turn your camera off while you're eating, I would appreciate that. I'm distracted a little bit by that. Thank you. Okay, and sorry about that. As we shall see, the therapeutic action in deep embodied treatments needs to advance the patient from surviving defensive rigidity to thriving adaptive resilience. So, psychodynamic psychotherapy must therefore, this is an important slide here, afford the patient both impetus and opportunity, albeit belatedly after the fact, to master traumatic relational experiences, both presence of bad, trauma and abuse, absence of good, deprivation and neglect. Anyway, master traumatic relational experiences, too much bad, too little good, that had once been overwhelming and therefore defended against, but that can now, in the treatment, be revisited, reprocessed, grieved, and reframed, such that growth impeding old bad rigid defenses once necessary for survival can be incrementally transformed, iterative healing cycles, disruption repair, and reconstituting at ever higher levels of nuanced resilience and adaptive capacity and dynamic balance, can be incrementally transformed into growth promoting new good resilient adaptations. And throughout, I'm going to be distinguishing between, in just a sort of simple way, old bad and new good. And ultimately, I'll be talking about generating optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences between old bad and new good. And in all 5 of my models, the 5 models in my Stark method, the interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis, model 1, the deficiency compensation or corrective provision perspective of self-psychology, the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory, my model 4, an existential humanistic approach to easing, to facilitating surrender into analytic oneness, Ofra Eshel, and easing despair, and so on. And then model 5, a quantum neuroscientific approach to analysis paralysis and neural entrenchment and being just really stuck. But anyway, be that as it may, now why'd I get into that? But in any event, those are my 5 models. I guess I felt just compelled to sort of name them for those of you who sort of like, huh? And then a lot of you, yes, already know those. So from rigid defense, oh, I see, old bad, new good, and a juxtaposing to create the mismatch experiences, and working through and resolution of which will be the way in which the patient is incrementally advancing from rigidity to more resilience in all 5. Ultimately, ever more aware, model 1, ever more accepting, model 2, ever more accountable, model 3, ever more accessible or available or authentically present, model 4, and ever more action-oriented, activated. Notice all A's, those are the adaptations. All right. Indeed, from psychological rigidity to psychological resilience and stronger at the broken places. And I really, a question that I will often ask is, how many times, as you think about your patients over the course of the last week or the last month or whatever, how often did you make them anxious? And I hope the answer is, well, I did make them anxious. And then I also provided support. So I anxiety provoking challenge, but also anxiety assuaging support. That's what I'm talking about, mismatch experiences, not just good, and sort of, oh, they feel it's all good, they feel held, they feel supported. That's good. And they feel good, but they leave the session and it's gone. And they come back the next time, and this happens in my Thursday spot supervision sessions where clinicians presenting will be honest and acknowledge that the patient comes back. They would have had an outstanding session from the point of view of both patient and therapist, but the patient comes back either the next day or the next week and says, I went home and it was gone. And that means it wasn't really deep structural change. And I'm talking about deep structural change. It doesn't mean that everything changes, but that there are some structural additions, some structural modifications to what's inside, such that you're ever more psychologically resilient, ever better able to handle all the some things that come our way over the course of a day, even. Okay, stronger at the broken places. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places, Ernest Hemingway. And my favorite slide, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know how they ever created that, but there you go. And he's going to get that cheese if he could ever figure out a way to kind of reach around and get it. All right. Okay, the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy, 5 dimensions of resilience. Now, I also call it a CARES approach, CARES, to help you kind of remember a little better. We'll get to that in 1 second. Okay, so the Stark method, a lot of words here, but people who know my teaching style know that I tell you what I'm going to teach you, and then I teach it to you many times over, and then I tell you what I told you, and then I return again. So wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. So the first numbers of times you may think like, oh my God, but eventually, hopefully, you'll start to get into the flow of it. All right, so we have 5 interactive, interdependent, mutually enhancing modes of therapeutic action. I care about how we translate our theory into real life practice. That's what I care about. And I know a number of you also care about that, including Ehsan, the diet, and others care a lot about how we do this. So not just theory, not just practice, but how we translate or integrate. Okay, model 1. The interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis. I chose a sentence that comes to mind perhaps for many of us. Where id was, there shall ego be, is one way to capture the essence of classical psychoanalytic approach. Model 2, the deficiency compensation perspective of self-psychology. Pretending that it can be when it can't is how people break their hearts. Elvin Semrad, one of my mentors at Mass Mental Health Center decades ago during my training. And the point here is, whereas model 1, as we shall see, the interpretive perspective is about interpretation, model 2, this deficiency compensation or corrective provision perspective, is ultimately about facilitating grieving, because it's the process of grieving disillusionment, because you had the illusion, and then the inevitable disillusionment that by way of working through, by grieving, the disillusionment, there will be, and I'm going to use these big words, we'll get more into them later, adaptive, right, not defensive, adaptive, transmuting, that means structure building, internalizations of the good that had been and is, apart from the empathic failure. Anyway, Semrad's quote is very relevant, pretending that it can be when it can't. So these are people who have the relentless hope, my expression, relentless hope, or the illusion of perfection or perfectibility in others and the self. Right? But pretending that it can be when it can't, when the panel of 10,000 objective judges would have said, forget it, it's not going to happen, is how people break their hearts. Okay, model 3, the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory. And I finally just decided to put in my quote, the hallmark of a successful projective identification, because that figures prominently in the negotiating at Darlene Ehrenberg's Intimate Edge. The hallmark of a projective identification does. The hallmark of a successful projective identification is the therapist's ability to tolerate what the patient finds intolerable. So, by the way, may those of us who dare to venture into Model 3 land, the intersubjective realm, may we have been in our own effective, relatively successful treatment so that we can bring more of our authentic selves into relationship and do more negotiating at Darlene Ehrenberg's Intimate Edge. We'll say more about that later. Model 4, an existential humanistic approach, okay, to accessing the private self, the true self. You're thinking Winnicott, of course, easing loneliness and finding meaning in despair. And here we go. I know Hassan loves this one. It is a joy to be, I have to look on a sheet of paper to remember how this goes, but Hassan, I think, just knows it right out. It is a joy to be hidden, but a disaster not to be found. So there's the conflictedness in model 4 is around whether or not you're even in relationship, whereas we're going to find that in model 1, neurotic conflictedness, structural conflict, intra-psychic conflict, the conflict is an internal one between id and ego, and kind of superego, compliance on the one hand, defiance on the other. Must I be good or can I be bad? Must I comply or can I defy? That's an intrapsychic one. You're on an island. Am I allowed to masturbate or not? And it's much more intrapsychic. In model 4, the conflict is whether or not you dare to surrender to being in relationship. And you're torn apart at the thought of both being in relationship, which is terrifying, and then not being in a relationship, also terrifying. Okay. And model 5, a quantum neuroscientific approach, that was a latecomer to my modes. I'd had the first 4 modes. I'll just say this real quick, like model 1, structural conflict, model 2, structural deficit, model 3, relational conflict. Thank you, Stephen Mitchell and some others. Model 4, relational deficit. Thank you, Larry Hedges, for making me put model 4 in what used to be just 1, 2, and 3. And he made me put model 4 in because he saw what was missing. And I will be forever grateful to him because now the work that I do is so much better. And I almost sort of feel that, I mean, like my Modes of Therapeutic Action book, award-winning, if I could be so bold, was knowledge, experience, and relationship, models 1, 2, 3. And it was only later that I got it that I should put in relational deficit. And so I almost feel I need to go back and apologize to all of my earlier patients that I never kind of picked up on this existential humanistic approach. So too with my West Coast swing dancing. Those of you who know me know that I love to dance West Coast swing, and I do it even as an older person. I do it. So I dance with people who are 60 years younger than I am. And I know that they look at me, and if they don't know me, they think like, oh my God, this is going to be a charity dance. In West Coast swing, you have to say yes. So women ask men ask women dance with women, men dance with men, you lead, you follow, whatever. So I'll ask some young fellow, and I know he's thinking like, oh my God, I got to dance with this old one. But then, you know, I've been at this for some time, and I can just feel after 1 or 2 little passes, so like, oh, well, this isn't so bad. But anyway, all right. So anyway, so maybe I have to apologize to earlier on before I'd had all my private lessons, and now I am good at West Coast Swing. All right. But anyway, model 5, a quantum neuroscientific approach to completing the trauma. It's a little bit of a more embodied approach and liberating latent potential. And of course, Bessel van der Kolk, the body remembers even when the patient does not. Okay, here. So now a way to kind of remember it, because I know it's 5, and how do you remember 5? I think people say you can remember 3 things at once, but not more than that. So I'm going to try to help you remember all 5, and maybe I'll give you a quiz at the end. All right. It's a CARES, C-A-R-E-S approach to deep embodied healing. Model 1 is cognitive, classical psychoanalytic, knowledge. Model 2 is affective. It could be emotional, but affective. I want it to be an A, and that's more about experience. Model 3, relational. That was easy. More about relationship. Model 4, existential. Now we're getting there. That's about meaning, C-A-R-E. Then, more recently, from 2010 to 2020 is when I was getting more and more training in the shorter term, more intensive approaches. And I got with the program, and I realized I needed to add a model 5, and that's called synaptic, and that's about memory and narratives. But then since it's quantum neuroscientific, the neuroscientific is synaptic, but the quantum part is superpositional. Notice the S, the existence of multiple possible states simultaneously. And then actually in a course that I was teaching Actually, Christine Amos said, well, actually, shape shifting, that could work too. And actually, yep, shape shifting, it could be. So we have CARES, CARES, it's a CARES approach. Now, I hesitate to mention this because everybody says, oh, I want you to do it now. But I have 5 more years to do it because it takes me a decade to do each of these. The sixth one would be a somatic spiritual approach. And but I'm not evolved enough yet to be able to get there. And that would be CARESS, a caress approach to deep embodied healing. Wouldn't that be cool? So everybody says, oh, tell me about it. Well, I don't have it yet. It's more virtual. I don't have it yet, but I'm working on it. Okay, so here we go, in no particular order other than when I first became familiar with each approach. So this is just kind of trying to encapsulate what I've said to this date. In the 70s, the interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis, enhancement of introspective knowledge within. Notice the prepositions. Model 2, that was in the 80s. The deficiency compensation perspective of self-psychology. This is provision of compensatory experience. 4, notice the preposition. Model 3 in the 1990s, Darlene Ehrenberg and Jessica Benjamin and Owen Rennick and Stephen Mitchell and Jay Greenberg and all the wonderful people at the William Alanson White Institute. And they were sort of like totally cool. Now, people faulted them for sort of like, well, it's all about what's happening in the here and now. What? The unconscious is a black box? Sort of like, no. But then nor is it that Model 1, classical psychoanalytic, what? It's all about what is in that box and not about relationship. No. So that's why it isn't that way, really. But that's why I decided to get really clear about these 5 different approaches that are mutually enhancing. They're not exclusive. They're interdependent. And over the course, I'll say more about this in a moment, over the course of a session, you are busy, sort of like in a dance, as a therapist, shifting back and forth between addressing either 1 or 4 or 2 or 3 or 5, moment by moment. And do you make a lot of mistakes? Yes, you do. In every session that I do, I probably make like a misstep. I probably make, I don't know, 8. I made that number up. 12 missteps where I realized, shit, there was an opportunity to do something and I missed it. Or sort of like, well, I said that and it was right, but the timing was off. And it's okay. It's okay. You can make lots of mistakes. If you're not making lots of mistakes, you're probably not trying hard enough. All right, anyway, so intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory, right? Engagement in, well, authentic relationship with. I decided to use the word authentic in Model 3, although, because I'm not allowed, this is my rule, I'm not allowed to use significant words in several different models at the same time. And I'm sorry about that a little bit because I'd like to be able to use it in Model 4. But I guess I can't because it goes in Model 3. So Model 2 is about empathic attunement. Model 3 is about authentic engagement. All right, Model 4, 2000 to 2010, an existential humanistic approach to benign regression, fostering it, facilitating that, and harmonious interpenetrating mix-up. Michael Balint. I love that. Or analytic oneness. Ofer Eshel, an Israeli psychoanalyst, and our dear Winnicott, A New Beginning. So this is an existential approach to fostering, facilitating, so we think facilitating environment, holding environment, Winnicott, to creating, fostering a benign, not malignant, but a benign regression. And Model 5, 2010 to 2020, where I finally got with the program a quantum neuroscientific approach to overcoming analysis paralysis and neural entrenchment. This is about envisioning of quantum possibilities beyond. All right, so for some of you, it's like, oh my God, and others of you, oh, okay, interesting. All right, here's another way to capture it. So Model 1, structural conflict. Now, though I did say it's not all about about diagnosis, but everybody says, well, what would the diagnosis be? Well, I don't really do it diagnostically. All right, I will. Might as well be flexible and resilient. So we'll go with the neurotic. Now, let me just say, to be more respectful, it would be patient who has neurotic tendencies. But I didn't want to write the patient who has. So please just know when I say the neurotic, it's not quite like saying in a hospital the tumor, the heart disease down the hall, or the heart attack down the hall, or the stroke, whatever. So it could be a little disrespectful, but please let me say this. So the neurotic conflictedness. Model 2, structural deficit. because of absence of good. So now we have narcissistic vulnerability, narcissistic woundedness, and narcissistic damage. And we have the narcissist. Model 3, now we have, thank you, Stephen Mitchell and others, relational conflict. Now we have noxious relatedness. Now, why did I say noxious relatedness? Notice, please, the ends. The N words. So neurotic conflictedness, narcissistic vulnerability, noxious, meaning contentious and not so good, noxious relatedness. So now we have the character disorder, and we have a little more extreme version, the borderline, who doesn't really have a solidly established evocative memory capacity. More on that another time, not today. Model 4, relational deficit. Thank you, Larry Hedges. Now we have non-relatedness. Non-relatedness, there's the N word. Or as Arne Modell would have said, affective non-relatedness. Now we have the schizoid, the addict, and the outlier. And often neurodivergence. Now, again, we can all have, I mean, I have elements of all 5 of these, by the way. It's not like you're just one. You have elements of all of them, but probably you're a little more predominantly one or the other, or the patient is. Okay, and then finally, model 5, analysis paralysis, neural entrenchment, non-action. This is for individuals who in the moment are in a state of paralysis, tethered to their traumatogenic past, trapped in implicitly held old bad embodied memories / narratives, deeply ingrained limiting beliefs, as they're now called these days, emotional learnings and limiting beliefs, and conditioned relational expectations. I kind of wanted to put all those in there because I did. And I bought this from Shutterstock for $35. I love it. Synergy. It felt like it kind of represented my psychodynamic synergy paradigm. Okay, so here we have it. From rigid, the therapeutic action, from rigid defense to resilient adaptation, again, and from conditioned reaction to corrected response. Okay? Okay, so now I want to focus on the defenses, then I'll focus on the adaptations. And then I'll be focusing more on the process. Okay, rigid defense, many ways to describe that. Outdated, mindless, conditioned. Get it? It's conditioned. It's knee-jerk reactivity. Conditioned reaction. Reflexive clinging to what once protected, but now impedes. So resistance. I wrote 2 books about resistance, classical psychoanalytic resistance, which is an internal matter. Relentless hope, sort of my term there, a refusal, not the inability. I don't really go for inability. The refusal to confront and grieve the reality of the object's limitations, separateness, and immutability. That's relentless hope. Okay, that's model 2. That's the defense. These are all the defenses. Model 3, reenactment. Compulsive and unwitting reenactment of unmastered early on relational traumas on the stage of the treatment and on the stage of one's life. So that's reenactment. Notice the R words. All of the defenses start with the letter R. Okay, model 4, we have retreat. Now, this is an existential humanistic perspective. So the more humanistic perspective, perhaps retreat, and the more existential perspective would be rejection of existence. So, well, okay, I'll leave it at that for the moment. Okay, in model 5, quantum neuroscientific, refractoriness, refractory inertia. But that's kind of a big word. So my people have said, oh, Martha, why don't you just say rut? All right. So this is when they're in a rut. Okay, the 5 dimensions of psychic rigidity. Stephanie Barthmeyer really loved this slide, so I wanted to put this in here. Model 1, the resistant self. Model 2, the relentless self. Model 3, the reenacting self. Model 4, the retreating self. And Model 5, the refractory self. And now let me just say, people will send to me, I mean, if you could send an anonymous email, they would probably want to try to do that. But people send to me, they'll say, by the way, Martha, I want you to know I'm model 4. Well, I want to say, quite frankly, all of us have, especially all of us therapists or people who are actors or whatever, We have a bit of the Model 4. A lot of us do. Very few people are just like totally, totally out there and solidly comfortable with engagement and it's all good and we bring our true selves and our authenticity, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, the retreating self, and the refractory self. Okay. Now for adaptations. Resilient adaptation. These are updated, not outdated, but updated, more mindful, not mindless, corrected, not conditioned responses. Conscious embrace of what was once intolerable, but now empowers. So, model one, awareness. Model two, acceptance. Now, you might say, well, wait, model one, Freud, whatever, that was about insight. I know, but insight starts with an I. So, can we go with awareness? Let's agree we go with self-awareness, awareness. Model two, acceptance, sober, mature acceptance of the reality that it was what it was, is what it is. But a sober, mature acceptance that sort of like, good. Hi, Sylvia, again. Glad to see you back. Okay, good. So, model three, thanks for the smile. Okay, model three, accountability. Now, sometimes people will say, well, if you're holding the patient accountable, don't they feel blamed? You got to do it carefully, obviously. But in accountability is also an important word. The important word in accountability is empowerment. If indeed you can hold yourself responsible for and take ownership of and accountable for something, there's empowerment in that because you can do it differently next time. And in your relationships, for example, you know that you shouldn't be ever busy thinking of yourself as a victim or ever busy wanting to get back at someone, that there's accountability for those unmastered early on relational traumas and the narratives that derived from early on traumatic relational experiences and what you might then knee-jerk in a conditioned way tend to play out or reenact on the stage of the treatment. Now, it is also enactments. That's the way it is in the literature. But then some people, including me, come along and say reenactment. Usually the enactments are a story about what had been. And it's a reenactment with the hope for a different outcome, a better outcome this time. Okay, model four. Okay, here we go. The A word, so what you get to, right? So from the defenses, all of which start with R, we went through that, to the adaptations, all of which start with the letter A. So in model four, we have accessibility, emotional accessibility, emotional availability, and aliveness. Aliveness. Okay. Now, I said it's existential humanistic. So that first part is a little more, well, humanistic maybe, but existential, I want to say model four is a story about helping the patient evolve from, because it's a graduated, evolving over time, from nihilistic rejection, there's the R word, there's the defense, nihilistic rejection of existence. If John Crete's on the line, I hope he's going to like this. Anyway, from nihilistic rejection of existence, of life, to existential acceptance. There's the A word. Acceptance of life's complementarities, complexities, polarities, uncertainties, paradoxes, and dialectical somethings, and from rejection of life to acceptance of it's what I call two parts, both end, but it's sort of like, yeah, the despair, but also aliveness. And yes, and then we're going to die at the end anyway, but also, so it's both. And right, and being able to accept the reality that it's not just all good or all bad, but it's both. Two parts, both end. All right, model five, action, activation, actualization. Okay, good. Okay, the therapeutic action. So here are important words in red. So please, if you had to choose one word, this is what I went with. So these are the 5 catalysts for change. And over the course of a session, you might be staying in one of them or maybe never doing any of them. That's okay too. And just supporting and creating the holding. But then we're not really talking about deep structural embodied change. But if we're talking about going deep, whether short term or longer term, or long term or shorter term, okay. Model 1, this won't surprise you, right? Interpreting, like duh, right? Interpreting to resolve structural conflict, neurotic conflict. Can I be bad or must I be good? And there are other conflicts too, but that's a prominent one. Between forces, id forces, aggressive, sexual, whatever, and resistant mobilized by the ego, made anxious, resistant counterforces, creating that. So you interpret it and hope to enhance the patient's awareness of the fact that they have this kind of internal conflict. Interpreting, okay, model 1. Model 2, grieving, fundamentally about grieving. Now, not all self-psychologists are busy thinking, that it's about grieving. Some would just simply say it's sort of mostly about the holding and creating a safe space. And that's certainly necessary. It's actually necessary for all 5. It's necessary, period. But plenty of self-psychologists do also talk about the importance of grieving, and it's they who've come up with the term transmuting internalization, meaning structure building internalization, whereby you internalize or take in self-object, psychological parenting functions that the object, the self-object, had been providing prior to the empathic failure. And so you have to grieve that, process and integrate it and grieve it. And as part and parcel of the grieving, there will be adaptive, transmuting, structure building, internalization. And in the literature, though it's sloppy in the literature, I like to make the distinction between defensive introjection of bad. Think pathogenic introject, defensive introjection of bad. So your pathogenic introjects. Model 3 is a story about internal presence of bad, versus adaptive internalization of good. So model 2 is part of the healing is adaptive internalization of good as a result of grieving, disillusionment, disappointment, and loss. There you have it. That's model 2. By adaptively internalizing self-object functions. Okay, now we do model 3, negotiating. And thank you, Darlene Ehrenberg, negotiating at the intimate edge to resolve relational conflict by over time negotiating at the intimate edge. And the messiness, Ed Tronick talks about the messiness in the intersubjective in between, and Jessica Benjamin and the mothers talk a lot about this, negotiating the intersubjective in between by taking, and ultimately to transition the patient from the noxious relatedness and contentious relatedness to more accountability. And I mean, it's not like everything's all good now, but being able to take ownership of the part you've played in the messiness that can sometimes unfold in a relationship. Okay, moving on here. Okay, model 4, surrendering, one of my favorite words here. So surrendering. Now, let me say, somebody, Marway, pointed this out to me. Model 1 is about interpreting. That's what the therapist does. Model 2 is about grieving. Actually, that's what the patient does. Model 3 is about negotiating. That's co-created. That's done by patient and therapist. But that's at the heart of the therapeutic action. Okay, model 4, surrendering, the therapist facilitates, and I'm copying from Masood Khan now. He says that it's important to be able to help the patient overcome their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence. I'll say it again because I so love those words. So in model 4, and it's about helping the patient, facilitating the patient's overcoming of their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence, or Winnicott would have said absolute dependence or infantile dependence, and such that there can be a starting over, a new beginning. This is where it's regress to redo. This is where, quite frankly, this is about what, some people think of psychoanalysis, like, oh, you got to go back and regress. In model 1 per se, I don't see it as being so much about regression per se. Model 4, when necessary, and at some point or another, probably for all of us, in a good treatment that we got, or several treatments that we might have ultimately had, there will be an opportunity to go back, to do a redo. And I kind of into energy medicine and stuff like that, and scalar energy. I have a little device that I put on my body, scalar energy, and it does a cellular reset. And I think of model 4 as being sort of a bodily and mental reset. So you can kind of start over again. Okay, surrendering to resources dependence, Masood Khan. Okay, to resolve relational deficit. And the thought being that you will then generalize it from the small to the all. Okay, so if they can do it with you, the therapist, ultimately maybe with others as well. Okay, model 5, quantum neuroscientific, disentangling. Now we're talking about narratives, and memories, and little T traumas and big T traumas, more specifically focused. And a lot of short-term intensive approaches do address more specifically little T traumas, big T traumas, narratives, storylines, themes, and so on. So disentangling, and that's quantum disentanglement, disentangling, rescripting of narratives, and updating to resolve psychic inertia and neural entrenchment or conditioned reactivity. Ultimately, by juxtaposing, here you do it in a very obvious way with quantum disentanglement statements, by juxtaposing the sobering, conditioned reality of old bad with the enlivening quantum possibility of new good. Okay, so, well, now I'll just say this real quick. Model 1, interpreting from resistance to self-reflective awareness. That's our goal in little bits and pieces. Model 2, grieving from relentless hope to sober, mature acceptance. Model 3, negotiating from reenactment to empowering accountability. Model 4, surrendering from retreat to emotional accessibility and awakened aliveness. And model 5, disentangling, rescripting, updating of narratives and memories, implicit relational knowing, and so on, from refractoriness to intentioned, purposeful action, and the envisioned becoming of what was once unimaginable. Now, I have not yet gotten enough into meditation. I should have, although I do a little bit of Tara Brach, but not nearly enough. But my people tell me that mindfulness meditation and stuff, in essence, is a lot model 5. So against the backdrop of old bad and then envisioning new good. So I love that. I love that. But there too, creating optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences. Okay, moving on. Oh my God, even this is a little overwhelming for me. These 5 models in my psychodynamics energy paradigm, so we already know what they are designed to serve as a conceptual framework for, this actually is an important slide. There are a lot of words on it, but it's important. Both teasing out the patient's underlying and more enduring psychodynamic traits, signature character traits that are relatively stable and sustained over time, and directing the therapist's immediate focus to the patient's transient and ever-shifting psychodynamic state. These are the defensive reactions that are more fleeting. And these would be, oh, I'm sorry, the earlier one, yes, either neurotic, narcissistic, noxious, non-related, or non-actualized. That's more foundational. That's more character structure. Whereas in the moment by moment, and what you're sitting with as you sit with your patient is in the moment, in reaction to what just happened or didn't happen, whether or not they become resistant or relentlessly hopeful or reenacting or retreating or rooted to the spot. Or nothing. That's okay. Maybe nothing, but that's okay. But in other words, the Stark method offers therapists a clinical compass. Think of my $35 synergy compass, a coherent theoretical scaffolding specifically designed. And by the way, I've developed this over the course of 45 years. This was not something that I just sort of invented last night, although quite frankly, I'm so busy evolving that my slides from yesterday are a little different today because I keep evolving in my thinking. There you go. So a coherent theoretical scaffolding specifically designed to guide, orient, and steady them, therapists, in real time as they attune to the moment-to-moment dynamics of the unfolding clinical process. The Stark method is a nuanced, integrative model that holds both the enduring architecture of character structure and the fluid defenses that emerge within the evolving hello, Donna. Hello, Donna. Within the evolving relational matrix of the analytic engagement. Okay, so as a session unfolds, oh, here's a good expression here, the point of emotional urgency. So I think that, I mean, yes, we want to be micro-tracking their affect, but also able to tease out the point. I didn't, and I'll correct this. Bob Mailman taught me this one, and I should have put it, I have him elsewhere. I should have put it here. So he taught me about this one. The point of emotional urgency for the patient, it will inevitably shift. Like what's most important to the moment to the patient in the moment, guiding the therapist toward the model most clinically relevant in the moment. So model 1, neurotic conflictedness, resistance. Then you do a conflict statement. Now you don't know what those are yet, but you will eventually. To highlight the internal ambivalence and tension between can I be bad or must I be good, you do a conflict statement. Model 2, narcissistic woundedness, therefore relentless hope, and disillusionment statements. That's the intervention. To facilitate grieving. And you can do it other ways too. But people say, well, how can you do it? So like, okay, well then do something akin to a disillusionment statement, which has 3 parts. You had so hoped that I would just simply give you the answers and you would feel better. That's the first part. But you're beginning to get it that it doesn't work that way. That's the reality of their disillusionment. And it enrages you, and it's devastating. You had so hoped that she would eventually come to love you, but you're beginning to get it that she really doesn't, that she's already married or that she's going to marry someone else. And it's devastating. That's to facilitate the grieving, and working through disillusionment and loss. And again, the good thing about that will be the adaptive, you just memorize this in your head, adaptive, transmuting internalizations of the good stuff that was there, that then gets to be preserved internally. Model 3, the noxious relatedness, leading to reenactments. And now we use accountability statements or relational interventions to negotiate the edtronics messiness of mutual enactments or reenactments at the intimate edge, Darlene Ehrenberg, of authentic relatedness. And projective identification is often involved here. I also have something that I call my rule of 3, which is really sort of a take-home please. And today's Thursday, tomorrow, Friday, maybe use it with your patients. The rule of 3 is as follows. When the patient has done something that you, the therapist, consider to be provocative, a provocative enactment, given everything, it's provocative, a little obnoxious and not fair and provocative, then you get to say to them 1, 2, or 3 of the following. And it's along the lines of accountability and ultimately empowering them. So you can ask either, how were you hoping I would respond to what they'd just done? Okay, that's more id. And or you could say, how were you afraid I might respond? That's more superego. And or how were you imagining that I would respond? Whereby you're attempting to engage the executive functioning of their ego. So the example I always give is, it was at the end of the session. I'm walking my patient to the door. I've worked with my patient for quite some time. And right at the door, she says, oh, by the way, I've decided I'm going to take a break. And I, inside, sort of, God, that's not okay to do it that way. So I had some countertransferential reactivity for sure. And in the moment, I almost forgot my rule of 3. And then I tried to process and integrate my annoyance and upset. And then I managed to say, finally, how do you think I'm going to respond to that? I figure I might as well get a little supervision from her. So how do you think I'm going to respond to that? And she said, oh, you're probably going to say, come back next time and we'll talk about it. So I said, yes, come back next time and we'll talk about it. So she came back the next time, we talked about it, and many other things for the next years. So it's all good. So anyway, so that was model 3. Model 4, okay, non-relatedness, retreat, facilitation statements a la Winnicott, to highlight the need for and fear of engagement with life itself. For them, the ambivalence. Model 1, the ambivalence is an intrapsychic. Can I masturbate or must I not? Can I be bad or must I be good? Model 4, the ambivalence is about even being in relationship. So to highlight the need for and fear of engagement with life itself. It's an existential humanistic approach. And I am really all about, I have people presenting to me in my Thursday spot supervision group. I love them. And then people listen to the recording, but I've got a wonderful group. Any of you are welcome to join, entirely free. Many of you are already in it. And we will talk about how important it is to understand and appreciate the patient's ambivalence and conflictedness about even being in relationship. And anyway, I don't want to get caught up in that. So, but I just want to say that and invite you, please, to join on Thursdays if you would like. But so the conflict for the patient is around a part of them is yearning and longing to be part of the world and to be in relationship. But, or maybe it's and, I kind of go both ways on that. And another part of them, so parts of them, thank you, Dick Schwartz. But anyway, another part of them terrified of being destroyed. And were they to be in relationship? So anyway, Model 4 addresses the ambivalence they have about even being in relationship. We talk about that a lot in the spot supervisions. Okay, and Model 5, non-actualization, non-action, quantum disentanglement statements to juxtapose old bad with new good narratives. So learned expectations, which are more reflexive, with envisioned possibilities. Okay, to review, the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy offers an, I don't want to read that. Nah, I'm over it. But it's there, and it's a nice sort of summary of what we've been saying all along. But ultimately, from conditioned and reflexive to corrected and more reflective. Okay. Now, Charles Krebs, a brilliant neuroscientist, a colleague of mine up here in Boston, he says, open, self-organizing, complex, adaptive, in other words, chaotic systems resist perturbation, resist being disrupted. Examples include road traffic, the stock market, ocean turbulence, and relevant here, the self-regulating mechanisms, defenses and adaptations mobilized by anxious patients attempting to manage the stressors in their lives. Okay, let me just see. Self-organization is synonymous not with health, but with stability, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, let me do this one. I'm going to skip over these because I want to get to some other stuff, but it's in the slides. The PDFs are in your slides, thank you, and they're in that thing I sent out yesterday. And tomorrow, when you get the recording, which is a separate link, you'll get the PDFs again if you'd like. Okay, it took me years to appreciate something that is at once both simple and profound. I mean, it's like so obvious, it's sort of almost embarrassing to say this, but it will be input from the outside and the patient's capacity to process, integrate, and adapt. Those are three important words: to process or metabolize, integrate, and adapt to the impact of this input from the outside that will ultimately enable the patient to get better. So you don't just get better by being on an island, although you may develop some more awareness and become able to masturbate or something without feeling that you're a bad person. But basically, it's input from the outside. I mean, I'm kind of more relational, and what most people are at this point. And even Freud knew. I mean, Freud knew that you have a mother and a father, and he knew he had a daughter and stuff like that. So he didn't emphasize it, but I mean, of course he knew. All right, but anyway, but more importantly, it will be stressful input from the outside and the patient's capacity to process, integrate, and adapt to the impact of this stress that will ultimately jumpstart the patient's recovery by tapping into the patient's underlying resilience, innate striving toward health. You have to believe in what we have, even as we get older and our defensive system or our immune system isn't quite what it used to be. We do have an intrinsic capacity to self-correct. You got to believe in that. I believe in it in the face of optimal challenge. Okay, so here's a really important concept, and I'm going to skip over the next several slides, but important here, superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one as a corrective for earlier damage and to optimize functionality. Do you get it that I am basically, when I talked about the holding, the provocation, and then the consolidation, thank you, Martha Carr, do you understand that I'm really, the provocation, I'm talking about superimposing something that's going to be disruptive attunement even. Salman Akhtar and Jim Herzog, disruptive attunement. So that whereas there had been homeostatic attunement, the holding, so a preserving of the status quo, no matter how dysfunctional, now we're going to superimpose an acute injury on top of a chronic one. Now, the chronic one was the stuff early on. The acute injury is what we're doing with our optimally stressful interventions. That's what we're doing. Now, let me just say, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But then, quite frankly, you do a lot of holding, it's all good. The patient sort of feels better. It may not last all that long, and then they go on to another therapist. Part of my perspective has to do with for decades now. When you get to be a certain age and long in the tooth, you have to talk about decades. I've worked with a lot of patients who've had previous failed therapies. So they might have had all sorts of good stuff. And I might say to them, "Hey, did your therapist ever fail you?" And the answer would be, "Oh, no, 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 no. My therapist really understood." And I'm thinking, well, that's nice. That's nice and that's good. But by the way, they didn't have any deep embodied structural change and they're still hurting. And all the issues that they had, they're resistant, they're relentless, they're reenacting, they're retreating, and they're refractory are there, even though it felt really good being with that therapist. Or I could say, did you ever get angry at your therapist? Oh, no. No, 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 I didn't. Or I can ask the therapist, how many times over the course of the last months have you had patients getting angry at you? Oh, no, 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 not really. Nope, nope, not really. Well, sort of like that's okay, but that's kind of missed opportunity. Missed opportunity. The other thing that I talk about in terms of missed opportunity is I believe that whatever you say to the patient, try to get in the word some kind of affect so that you don't just interpret in a sort of more cognitive heady way, but you say something like, so painful to be thinking about how unresolved your relationship is still with your father because that's so interfering with your ability to engage with your husband. But I don't just say, because it was unresolved with your father, you're having trouble engaging with your husband. That's a beautiful Model 1 interpretation, but I want you to put the affect in. So painful to be realizing the price you've paid for being so unresolved with your father and how that then gets played out now with your husband. Do you see what I'm saying? Always get the affect in there. You don't lose. And that's going to deepen. That's going to deepen, deepen. So deepening the affect would be the second thing. And the first thing would be creating a situation sometimes where they're made anxious by a challenge. Challenge means, so I had somebody say, oh yeah, I challenged the patient. Yeah, I gave them a really deep interpretation. Oh, good. What was it? Okay, good. It was profound. I said, did the patient get anxious? Oh, no, no, they loved it. Well, okay, it was a brilliant interpretation, but it wasn't a challenge. And that's okay. That's okay. But by the way, that's not if you want deep embodied structural change. And some of our patients want it. They come to me and they say, and then, of course, it's sort of easy to be farther down the line because then you can sort of take risks because, other stuff, the being just nicey nice and warm and supportive and all the good stuff, they know and didn't quite get it done. So you can dare to take sort of more risks. Also, when you get older, I think people sort of give you a little bit more free rein, whatever. Maybe not. Maybe I just take free rein, be that as it may. But so I want you to understand profoundly, superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one, that's what we're doing for deep embodied change as a corrective for earlier damage done and to optimize functionality. So I'm sure that most of you, oh, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. We all love Rumi anyway. Isn't that kind of cool? Okay, well, we know what this is. Controlled damage to jump start healing. Okay, in the physiological realm, yes. So I'll just do one of them. High intensity interval training, HIIT, or intermittent fasting. I do intermittent fasting. I eat between 1 or 2 in the afternoon and 9 or 9:30 at night. So that's my window of eating. And otherwise, it's intermittent fasting. I'm not eating. But anyway, so intermittent fasting, so superimposing an acute something on top of a chronic one will no matter how good it is already or compromised it is, it will trigger the body's innate resilience and intrinsic capacity to self-correct in the face of. So for those of you, think in your head about whether or not you believe in high intensity interval training. You who used to go work out, are now getting it, that you can decrease your exercise time or your running time phenomenally by doing HIIT. Okay, this one. Yeah, right. I just read this real quick. Depriving ourselves of half a night's sleep once a week, preferably the second half of the night, for example, 3 to 7 a.m., can produce a rapid, even if short-lived, restabilization of mood and recovery from depression. And the thought is, these two folks think it, that the stress of interrupting normal sleep patterns may resynchronize disturbed circadian rhythms. So you disrupt the status quo. And then the body, with its innate resilience, will do whatever it needs to do to restore, and then some. And then some. All right. Well, moving on. Mental exercises. Yes, go at it. Your Sudoku and juggling. I was trying to do juggling for a while. That was a lost cause. I'd do the balls and I'd throw them out the window by mistake. I still have work to do on that, but so much for that. All right, here we go. And this is a lovely thing, but we're not going to do it. The Sandpalm model of chaos theory. Iterative cycles of defensive collapse in reaction to challenge, anxiety-provoking challenge, and adaptive reconstitution at ever higher levels in response to support and by tapping into the underlying resilience of the system, but restabilization at ever higher levels of complexity and dynamic balance. And it's a compelling visual. Don't you just love that picture? I can just like look at it for the cumulative impact over time of optimal stress on both body and mind. So there's some lovely things here, but without order, nothing can exist. But without chaos, nothing can evolve. Thank you, Oscar Wilde. Oh, the paradoxical impact of stress. Painful for me to have to go through these, but I'm going to try to handle it. Okay, so the well-known Japanese adage, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Although it's inspirational, I don't think it does full justice by evolutionary processes, which is what we're talking about here when I keep doing my hand like this. Probably more appropriate would be fall down 7 times, work it through by processing, integrating, and adapting to it. And then stand up ever more triumphantly 8. That's what it is. Not just fall down, stand up, but rather stand up after having worked it through. That's the process of psychodynamic psychotherapy, deep embodied change. Yes, and we all know about that. Yeah, it's more beautiful by virtue of the fact that it has been through its experience of rupture and then repair. Okay, I love this one. Stress is when you wake up screaming and then you realize you haven't fallen asleep yet. I hope I'm going to get you to smile. I got Sylvia to smile there and Donna to smile a little bit. Karen smiled. Yeah, I can only see some of you. But yes, I mean, I've done that. You like bolt out of bed and like, oh, right. Right. Okay. Okay, so you don't just wake up, speaking of waking up, and become the butterfly. Growth is a process. But again, it's not just that there's a beginning and an end. There are all these iterative, and elsewhere, and Christine Amos had sent me a lovely image of this, an ascending spiral staircase with landings. And so, and at other times I talk about thesis and antithesis, and kind of the resolution, the adaptive resolution is a synthesis, and you get to a landing. But then, oops, Houston, we have a problem, and then there has to be some more processing and working through of the optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experience between thesis and antithesis and evolving to the next level. And so it's an ongoing, that's more spiral staircase up that way. I tend to do more intuitively this, but they both work. It's an evolutionary process. Oh, and my little minion friends, people who know me know, and wait a minute. Yes, thank you, Marway. So anyway, I have my little minion friends close by my side. So anyway, working through involves a series of steps, iterative healing cycles of disruption and repair, although some of my little friends look none too happy about it. Okay, here we go. Okay. The essence of therapeutic choreography is what I'm now calling it. The holding and the provocation. Now, the consolidation is also relevant, but that's such a new thought for me, thank you, Martha Carr again, that I haven't yet fully integrated that onto the slides. I'm integrating it into my soul, but I'm still working on it. So this is going to be focusing in on the holding and the provocation. Here we go. So the idea of the holding and the provocation as the core dialectic. Okay, before deep psychodynamic work can begin, my eyes on the time, there must first be the holding, a phase of, and please put comments in the chat. I can't see that yet, but I will eventually, brief that are related to what I'm presenting here, please. And any questions that I don't answer, email me and I will respond, I promise. Okay. So there must be, before deep psychodynamic work can begin, there must first be the holding. a phase of steady empathic attunement that regulates the patient's anxiety, fosters safety, and allows the patient to feel deeply known and understood. So that if you were to ask the patient, do you feel understood? Not that I necessarily actually ask that, but if you did, they would say yes. Not that they've changed it all yet, but they feel that you deeply understand. That's the holding. That's not about they've changed yet. They feel good and they're glad and it feels good. And oh my God, they go home and, it blew out the window on the way home. But it felt good and so on. And maybe it'll enable them. Now they can do their taxes. They felt held enough and so on and loved and held enough and understood and all that. They went home, they sat down and they gathered together their information for their tax accountant. And they did it. But that's still not deep structural change. But that was change, and that's good and that's fine. And a lot of patients, that's fine, that's good. But others, and we ourselves, I mean, for me, myself, in my own analysis, so I had 8+ years, 3 times a week, psychoanalytically oriented therapy with my very dear social worker therapist. And did I get angry at her much? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. And she would attest to that. And then we would work it through, and it was incredible because we would work that through. That was phenomenally important for me. Then, in order to become an analyst, I needed my training analysis. So I had my training analysis with a male MD, and that one was as brief as they let you have it. But believe me, I got more work done. I still have more work to do, but anyway, I got more work done, and that was like the briefest you could have, like 3.5 or 4 years, and that was 4 times a week, and got some more stuff done there. But anyway, so yes, I have actually had the experience of the holding and the provocation. Oh, and with my analyst. Oh my goodness. Oh, yes, yes, yes. And my therapist. Oh yeah, I'd get mad. Oh, yes, I'd get mad. My goodness. And and Winnicott talks about the patient's efforts to destroy the therapist. And you prove yourself indestructible, the therapist, as the therapist. And it's phenomenally reassuring to be held in that way and to discover that you're not really going to destroy anybody. All right, back to my slides. Okay, so yes, the patient needs to be able to feel that they're deeply understood. I felt that I was deeply understood. All the good stuff inside of me, the bad stuff inside of me, the this, the that, the everything, deeply understood. And then there can be the introduction of the provocation, the stressor, the disruptive attunement. We'll get to that in 1 second. Oh, here we are. And then only once you have the holding firmly established, the patient feels deeply understood. This is the therapeutic choreography. This is big picture. Only then can the provocation be introduced. And I'm going to be saying much more about this even in September when I present to Gina Kwan and Teresa Tisdale, the Center for Psychoanalysis and Christianity. And forgive me, it might be Christianity and Psychoanalysis, but both of them are there. And in September. So just saying. Anyway, I'll talk much more about it then. But only then can the provocation be introduced. Gently calibrated, optimally stressful, growth incentivizing interventions that respectfully disrupt entrenched, conditioned patterns and awaken the patient's innate capacity for adaptive resilience. You know that in the world of the body, we talk about adaptive immunity, and we're talking about adaptive resilience here too. Much as a heart with partially blocked coronary arteries, when challenged, will adapt by forming collateral vessels to restore the flow of life-sustaining energy. That's what we're doing with our patients, helping them to develop collateral adaptive resolutions. Yes, they had the little t and the big T traumas. We all did. We all did. And yet, ultimately, again, the problem holds elements of the solution, and it's a metamorphing and an evolving from this rigidity to more resilience. And it's not necessarily that we sort of like get rid of stuff, but it's how we position ourselves, how the patient will position themselves in relation to that will then make all the difference. So a patient had come to me for a consultation, and she had allowed herself to be lured into being driven home by some fellow, a handsome fellow who seemed well-spoken. It's all good. She gets in his car, and then he drives her into the woods and starts to try to rape her. And she managed ultimately to get away. But when she came to me, which was some years later, she said she just couldn't get over hating herself for having been duped and seduced by this charming young man. So we talked and we talked, and amongst other things, I suggested, in essence, a repositioning, a superimposing of a new good way on the old bad, a new good narrative on top of the old bad narrative. And the new good narrative was she was such a survivor and thriver that she had gotten away. And he did not succeed in raping her. So it was the same incident, and I'm so sorry, but she repositioned herself in relation to it. And that's what we're talking about. We're not going to change our history or even change our here and now, but we reposition ourselves in relation to it. And a lot of you people, and thank you, especially in my spot supervision group, know that you watched me you watched me as I was experiencing it. I, who was happily living down in Clearwater Beach in our home on the beach, on the ocean. Oh, it's the Gulf of Mexico, but it looks like the ocean, so I call it the ocean. And my dear sweet Gunner said, yes, okay, you can call it the ocean, but it is the Gulf. But anyway, or I guess Trump would say it's the Gulf of Florida, right? Anyway, the Gulf of Mexico. Anyway, but I call it the ocean. But anyway, so that house, Hurricane Helene came, and we lost our house. Sewage backup and storm surge and the hurricane and the wind and all that. And we're still trying to reconstruct it. And it's hard. And of course, the hurricane season is coming again. So I'm now up here in Cambridge while my dear sweet Gunner down there trying to fix it and some other things that we lost down there. But it's sort of like how the fact of it doesn't change, but how you position yourself in relation to it. And I'll just share something real quickly like here, and that is what I've been able to do. I used to, with my dear sweet Gunner, this is sort of a kind of vulnerable and sort of sweet thing that I'm now going to say. What I used to do with my dear sweet Gunner is we would spend time together just being really happy and enjoying each other and enjoying our lives and enjoying playing and enjoying being together. I don't have that anymore, not directly. So I have a lot more time freed up. And with that time, I'm now being more productive. And so I'm creating all these PowerPoints and doing all these presentations and doing stuff that before maybe I didn't quite have the time for. So instead of being really happy, I'm really productive. And I do have a sense of deep satisfaction. And I am delighted to see all of you here and all the people who will be listening to the recording. So thank you for that. So we all have bad things that happen to us, but it's how we position ourselves in relation to them that's really going to make the difference. All right, back to my slides. So the holding, back to the holding, will enable the patient to feel deeply understood during the session. But that experience, although powerful and often cathartic, cannot usually be sustained once the patient leaves the therapist's office. Now, by contrast, ongoing introduction of the provocation, that is, superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one, and incremental working through of the mismatch experiences thereby created, will foster deep structural growth. An internal shift that endures as you're working it through and stays with the patient long after the session has ended. Okay, the essence of therapeutic choreography. I got that on Unsplash Pro. First the holding and then the provocation. That's very compelling. The holding. All right. Homeostatic attunement. Being with the patient exactly where she is, moment by moment. An attunement that maintains and does not disrupt homeostasis. You're not agreeing with it. You're not disagreeing with it. You're just understanding the fact of it. You're understanding, it's attuning to the status quo of the patient's defenses. You get it. Non-judgmental, compassionate. So empathic resonance is the therapist's exquisite attunement to the patient's internal world, a holding connection that tenderly validates and gently steadies what stirs within. It requires a finely tuned sensitivity, not only to the patient's affect moment by moment, especially when that affect carries overdetermined intensity or subtle emotional complexity, but also to the narrative with which that affect is intertwined. Often a deeply embedded limiting belief that is giving the feeling its organizing shape and its relational meaning. So the holding is necessary, but not sufficient for deep embodied healing. Now, introduction of the provocation. Now we have, whereas before we had homeostatic attunement, thank you, Jim Herzog and Salman Akhtar, now we have the introduction of disruptive attunement. And yes, in our 5 models, each of the prototypical statements, conflict statement, disillusionment statement, relational intervention or accountability statement, facilitation statement, quantum disentanglement statement, will involve both homeostatic attunement to the dysfunctional status quo, and then the introduction of a disruptive attunement, so that these interventions, all the middle game, all involve the homeostatic attunement and then juxtaposition of the disruptive attunement. But attunement is in both. So you don't just go wildly off into nowhere, but very carefully you direct the patient's attention to elsewhere, where you would want the patient to go, such that they will indeed get anxious, but not so anxious that they just simply can't handle it. So that's where you're superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one. But you have to have the holding, so that where you've resonated with and understood the need for. It's not about agreeing. Oh, I agree you need to be retreating. Oh, I agree you need to be. It's not about agreeing. It's not about you bringing your subjectivity in at all. It's understanding the patient's need for it. Empathic attunement. So I was on a panel once with the Dick Geist and the Anna Ornstein and Paul and stuff and whatever. I was on the panel, and we were asked, ideally, if the patient is seated there and you 5 are the therapist and you're being at your best empathic, are you all pretty much going to be saying the same thing? And we all answered yes, pretty much yes. Because we decenter from our own subjectivity, we join alongside the patient, and we take on the patient's experience, but only as if it were our own. It doesn't actually become our own. We take it on as if it were our own. So the Red Sox beat the Yankees. I was so happy, so happy. My patient from New York comes in the next morning. She is so depressed and so sad. I'm not, I mean, it's all I can do to sort of manage my excitement about the fact that we had won. And the game went 20 million innings and we all had a heart attack while we were watching, but whatever. But so I'm joining alongside, a smile from Sylvia, joining alongside the patient and understanding, because I've decentered from my subjectivity, decentered. Stollerow would talk about that earlier on in his writings. And you take it on and you feel your way into the patient's experience, but it doesn't become your own. I was still really glad that the Red Sox won. So anyway, now why'd I get into that? So anyway, homeostatic attunement is where you really just join them where they are. And it doesn't necessarily penetrate. It's not in you, but you deeply understand them and they feel deeply understood. Okay, now you introduce disruptive attunement. You direct them to where you would want them to go, and it will make them anxious. But now you're creating an optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experience between old bad, dysfunctional, and new good, more functional. Old bad, defensive, reflexive, mindless, and new good, more mindful, more reflective, more thoughtful. And you're introducing this provocation, this disruptive attunement, the provocation, da, 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 and you're going to da, 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 da. And by the way, if indeed you're thinking, oh my goodness, that's what EMDR does, sort of like, yeah, it does. And yes, I have training in EMDR. I'm not really that good at it, but I'm good enough. I read from my little sheet of paper and sort of like, on a scale from to 10, what are your SUDs? Anyway, but it's such a powerful technique that's sort of like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And the patients are like suddenly gets in touch with stuff that even after our years of working together and my being exquisitely attuned to the undertow and this and that, whatever, and they get to stuff that's sort of like, oh my God. So anyway, be that as it may, you're introducing, I mean, whether it's old, bad, new, good, or if it's a right brain, left brain, or if it's outdated or updated, or reflexive or reflective, or mindless or mindful, or conditioned or corrected, you're juxtaposing ultimately bad and good, bad, good. Can I be bad or must I be good? And you juxtapose, blah, 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 and the working through is the working through of the tension between these dialectical thesis and antithesis. And is it tricky? Tricky. It's what you spend some fair bit of time doing, but evolving ultimately to synthesis. All right, back to my sheet here. Let's see. Oh, I see. Disruptive attunement. Okay, directing the patient's attention to elsewhere. This is when you're introducing the provocation on top of the holding. Whereas empathic resonance, the holding, reinforces and affirms. I don't like the word reinforces. I'll get rid of that. Pretend it's not there. Provocative resonance unsettles and disrupts. So, effective only when grounded in homeostatic attunement. Disruptive attunement is the therapist's strategic. Yeah, okay, strategic. Oh my God, we should just be artful. We're artful, but we're also strategic. Strategic engagement with the patient's emerging edge, the judicious provision of optimal stress that respectfully challenges and gently stretches what has been held tightly within. All right. It demands exquisite attentiveness. I hope you're adding little comments in the chat, brief little somethings that I can address. I'm inviting you to do that. I'm going to wrap this up in a second and then come back if I'm going to take some questions from the chat. All right. It demands exquisite attentiveness on the therapist's part, not only to the gravitational pull of the familiar, no matter how dysfunctional, but also to the patient's innate thrust toward health, a vital organizing impulse that longs for coherence, growth, and aliveness. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So when you do that and you work it through and you provide the gentle jolt, the respectful challenge, the growth-provoking spark, that's the essential catalyst that ignites enduring change, a quiet restructuring of the psyche and of the self that lasts even after the dance is done and the curtain has fallen. There you go. All right. So now let me sign off for the moment. Stop share. Okay, here. And now I see all of you people. Oh, my goodness. Oh, look at you all. Oh, thank you. Now Laura's there. And so there's Christine. Okay, good. So I'm going to try not to get distracted by all of you lovely people. Dr. Ava. Oh, good. And Ruth. All right. So now, and Stephen. Hello, Stephen, and owner of something. All right. Let me just go to the chat because now I can go to the chat. I'm going to click. I'm clicking. Okay, chat. Here it is. So much for short. Huh. Well, okay, I'll do what I can. I'm going to skip over some of these. Test. Yep. Sharon Wiener. I reflect that the most important thing for a psychotherapist, is not to diagnose a patient's issue. Thank you. Rather, to follow the patient's, she recently dubbed her doctorate, rather to follow the patient's elastic. Well, oh, I see I raised my hand. I don't really need to do that. Okay. Rather to follow the patient's elastic development. God, what a good word. From anxious, rigid defense to a more adaptive one. Yes, that is the essence of what I'm talking about. So if I could, I'll do a heart up there for you, Shireen. That's perfect. Thank you. That is right. So the owner wanting to diagnose might be, the anxiety of the therapist to defend their domain. Oh, I like that. A little defensive. Thank you, owner. That's good. And or they feel somehow that for the record and for insurance, they got to have a diagnosis, and maybe they do need the diagnosis. Sadly. But deep in my heart, I mean, I'm aware of. I know what the word neurotic means. I mean, you saw I used it. I know what narcissistic means. I know character disordered. I know schizoid retreat. Model 4 a little bit, neurodivergent, and the outlier, and model 5 when they just ground to a halt and they're just stuck. And inertia means both the bad that they're doing, they can't stop, or also they're not doing any good and they can't get started. So anyway, I know about all that. But yeah, I don't like to get bogged down specifically with diagnosis. So can you tell that what I'm saying is that moment by moment, as you sit with the patient, you are thinking about the R words, the defenses, what has kicked in in response to the previous moment, which is a story about all the previous moments as well. What has kicked in? Are they, and in your heads, please think of this, are they, oh, Martha, you're actually sitting up. Are they actually resistant? Are they relentlessly hopeful? Are they reenacting? Are they retreating? Because maybe something you just said and they're retreating in the moment. They may not be primarily a Model 4, but they're retreating in the moment. Or are they refractory, just in a rut, rooted to the spot? And moment by moment, you're then attuning to that will guide you to where in the moment, it's moment by moment, you're going to be thinking about how you're going to intervene. It's always against the backdrop of empathic attunement. Now, so even though Model 2 sounds a little bit more like, oh, that's all about empathy, it is. It's especially about empathy. Model 3 about authenticity. Model 1 about neutrality and objectivity. Yes, yes, yes. But I believe that, period, across the board, we want to do our best to be empathically attuned as one of our several stances so that we do deeply understand, for example, the patient's need, hello, Ed, the patient's need to come, say, every other week. Rather than sort of like, oh my God, the patient wants to come every other week. Maybe we don't like it that they say, well, I'm going to come every other week now. And so on. But at least we think kind of Model 4, they're retreating. And sort of like something is getting a little bit overwhelming and scary for them. And for us to be entering into their experience and taking it on, but only as if it were our own. And we're getting it that for them, there's something very scary about being in relationship. And we get that. We're not approving. We're not saying, yes, that's good, or no, that's bad, or I. We don't use the word I agree, or I understand. You don't have to bring yourself in it. Decenter from that. And you get it. You'll say something very scary about. Scary, something hard, painful to think about. So you start your sentences with some kind of affect and then tease out the associated theme. Those were some slides I didn't quite yet get to, but tease out the intertwined or associated theme. Let's see. Yes. Anyway, so that is right. Not really about diagnosis per se. Not really. Though at gunpoint, if somebody said to me, "Do you think they're primarily neurotic?" I mean, okay, yeah, I guess so. But that doesn't inform primarily character disorder. Well, yeah, I guess so. But that's not really for me where I put my heart and my soul. So owner, I just love that. Okay, Martha Carr. The baby's heart rate variability predicts, yes, stress response capacity, at least the innate. Then we can have acquired. But it's not just the increased or variable heart rate, it's how quickly the fetus, yes, can move back to restorative state. Yeah. So that not which is a more granular and beautifully said, Martha, that back to a restorative state. So that, and even with our blood sugars, for those who have Oura rings and they're now doing Dexcom or whatever, and now they track their blood sugars spike, but how quickly spike of their sugar after they had something maybe they shouldn't have, but how quickly they can restore themselves to a more better level. So thank you for that reminder, Martha. The greater the capacity to do that, the better the ability adaptively to handle stress. Thank you, Martha. I mean, Martha, you are hot. You are on a roll. So thank you for that. And Martha is one of a number of people here who went to Miami. So in February, I mean, usually when I present, somebody else is sponsoring me or hosting me. And so I have to say, oh, is it okay for me to mention? But I'm realizing I'm the one sponsoring this. So I get to say what I want to say. So in February, I will for a week be in person in Miami. And some of you all, Bill Spring and Therese Johnson, his sister, brother, whatever, and Martha Carr and others, Ishan, were there. And Stephanie and Lauren and others, forgive me if I didn't say your name. But anyway, we're there, and I'm going to do it again. So in February. So please be on the lookout for that. But anyway, and so be that as it may. Yes, and Martha. All right. So let me move on here. Your description of your teaching method seems so much like what you prescribe for us to do with our patients. Trigger optimal anxiety / stress. Repaired empathic failures as an example. Wash, rinse, repeat. Oh my God, that's lovely. Thank you, Zoom user. Whoever you are out there, thank you very much for that. Oh, I see Matthew. Okay, let's see. Bill Spring. It seems to me that patients can end up at home, in Model 4, for reasons that originate in models 2 and 3. Yes. So it may be that we didn't even know we were dealing with the underlying despair or sense of disconnect or alienation, and we didn't even use the word despair for quite some time. We've been working in model 2 and they're doing some grieving, and model 3, we're negotiating at the intimate edge and they're holding themselves more accountable for their playing out of unmastered early on relational traumas, and they're becoming more comfortable doing stuff like masturbating on an island. There are other things too, but that's the one that kind of comes easiest to mind. And but and we're juxtaposing old bad narratives with new good narratives and so on. And we might not quite realize that actually at the end of the day, they really do need some time in model 4, an opportunity to overcome their dread of surrendering to being absolutely, totally, 100% reliant upon someone, the therapist in this case, because they couldn't do that early on with the early on parent. And when you get to a place where the patient, and so there's a time when sometimes my patients will say, and nowadays we do everything remotely and so on, so vacations are not as big a deal anymore. But back in the day when some of us sort of did time off in August, that's sort of what you did. If you were legit, you took time off in August, and patients would say, oh my God, how am I going to deal with your being away? And there would indeed be times when, or if something happened to you, how would I deal with it? And one answer in essence that I've given is, well, quite frankly, I don't say it quite this way, but in essence, I say, quite frankly, at this point, if something were to happen to me, you'd be up Schitt's Creek. But it's not always going to be that way, because we are actively doing our work at our intimate edge and model 2 stuff, grieving and this and that and internalizing, and models 4 stuff and feeling deeply held and coming more alive and into being and your true self blossoming, a la Winnicott and Arnie Modell and many others. And so there will come a time when it'll be sad if something happened to me, but quite frankly, it won't be the end of everything. So they're phases, right? So there'll be a time when, just as with a little one, if they lose their mommy and their daddy, they will survive, but that's going to be awful. But then there can come a time when you're like an adult saying you lose a parent, and it's like terrible. I've lost both my parents when I was a very grown-up adult, and it was terrible. But it wasn't like what it would have been had I been a very little one and I lost them. So, so anyway, okay, well, I'm not sure where that came from, other than Bill Spring. Thank you. Yes, yes. Ultimately, they end up at home in Model 4. Thank you. Thank you for that, Bill. Okay, Laura, I appreciate the reminder that it is okay, oh, absolutely, to make mistakes, and a necessary part. I think that it's not only inevitable, but it's necessary and therefore desirable. And I also have with my patients, we just call it's because my father was a chess master and other things too. But and in chess, you can do the take back. And so you can put your hand on something and move it, but the piece. But if you change your mind before the other person reaches for their piece, you can take it back. And I feel with my patients, I let them take back stuff, and I take back stuff. So I'll say something, and I can feel how it's landing in them. And it's like, oh my God, that's not right. And so then I say, can I take that back? And yes, now they'd probably remember it on some level, and I remember maybe what they said, but it's really not the same thing. I actually said to a patient one time, well, I love you and I even know you. That wasn't quite the way I wanted to say it, but I sort of meant to say, I do know them. I do know them in their depths, and I love them, whatever. Whatever. But so you can say stuff that's like, and you take it back. So thank you, Laura. I appreciate the reminder that it's okay to make mistakes. Oh, absolutely. And it's okay for them to make mistakes. And necessary part of learning reminded me how my perfectionism is in the way of my evolution learning. Let me say, Laura is someone who is fabulously attuned to her countertransference. May we all be attuned that she's acknowledging in front of all of us a perfectionism that, quite frankly, probably just about all of us have. And she's named that. And you're right. Oh, and you got a lot of likes on that one. You got yes, Liz, Tempe, and Cameron, and Mallory Weingard like that as well. Yeah, yeah. We all have stuff inside of us. I mean, the Well, I have one, and well, I can't. Well, anyway, about grammar. And when people say between him and I, it's supposed to be, of course, between him and me. I've learned I don't say anything, but inside of me, it's sort of like, between him and I. And then the question becomes, how do you repeat it? Do you repeat it the bad way, or do you sort of gently correct it? I usually kind of gently correct it, do a new good, correct the no, and to suggest that it really be between him and me. Anyway, but so we all have stuff that interferes. I have one, and that is, I mean, thank God. I mean, my mother ultimately died when she was 98, and it wasn't because she had been smoking, but she had been a smoker for a number of years. And my brother and I really got in her face about it. And then she finally, as a gift to us, because she was really addicted to smoking, to dad and to my sister and to my brother, she stopped smoking as a gift to us. And when she did ultimately die at 98, not because of the smoking, but all of us commented that that was one of the most precious gifts she had ever given us. But the net result is that when I have patients who smoke, I usually steer clear of it because I have feelings about it that aren't fully worked through. I have feelings about it, so we just don't talk so much about the smoking. And so that's a problem. I'm sorry, but we don't. And then whatever. So some of my patients, just as part of healthier living, because I think people sort of get it that I'm kind of about healthier living. Some of them just sort of automatically do stop, like somebody named Gail stopped, and I'm delighted that she did. Okay, Martha Carr here. Okay, I think I've been trying to put the models in a hierarchy. Thank you for getting it that it's not that, because I think you're going to say it's not that. Level two has more primitive defenses than those in level three, for example. Yeah, a lot of people are trying to do that. It confused me, however, because neurotic one was considered more developmentally stable than someone with self deficits level two, right? And level four may include more schizoid states. Yeah, no, I hope you change your mind. Now I see these are all simultaneous levels. Thank you, Martha. That's right. Smiling you are. However, it seems that one can be more stuck, yeah, at one level than another, yes. Or there can be dominance of one or another. Absolutely. Absolutely. So somebody, not so many issues, whatever, but they just have bad relationships with people. But the other things are good. But, they're advanced in their career and they're accepting of things, and then they can masturbate on an island and this and that, but they just get into contentious things with people. But they have other good things, and they're generous, and I mean, whatever. And they're whatever, they love their children, whatever. So yes, and it's not, nor is it that, well, you got to do model two first to get them feeling sort of comfortable and good, and then you can try some model one where you interpret, maybe you get them a little aroused a little bit, but or aroused, whatever, and then model three when you discover some problems at the intimate edge, and then model four when you sort of delve into that, and then finally, if they're kind of stuck, go to model five. No, in one session. Here's an example. Yep, my clock's over there. That's why I keep looking over there. Because there's my clock. Oh, there's my clock. And so a patient comes in. Yes, a patient comes in. I think to the emergency room, whatever, and they tell the story about how their beloved grandmother had died the night before, and as they tell me in a monotone. So clearly they're defended against letting themselves feel the full extent of their heartbreak. I, listening, find myself, this is one session, find myself feeling, an incredible sadness. And so I say, as I'm listening, I say with my hand here, oh, oh, I'm so sorry. By the end of the session, the patient himself is able to cry. Now, people think that that's empathy. Actually, I would call that more Model 3 authenticity. And I did it in one session. I let her experience come into me. I took it on as my own. And I wasn't just decentering and being empathic and not really deeply feeling it. I was actually feeling it. Probably resonating with losses I've had, et cetera, but feeling it in the here and now. Oh, and I get to say Model 3, I get to say the word I. Oh, I'm so sorry. And then that goes back. That was a projective identification happening. And that goes back into the patient who's then able to get in touch with what's now more manageable, and that is his own sadness and his own grief. That's model three. That's using our relationship and a certain kind of negotiating at the intimate edge to facilitate his evolving from the defensive, dissociated and flat and intellectualization and isolation of affect, whatever, to a more adaptive resilience and tears and grieving, which is a more important something, a more evolved and more better. Okay, so thank you, Martha. I love this. Now I see these are all simultaneous levels. However, it seems, yes, that one could be more stuck in one level than another, or there can be dominance of one or another. Absolutely. Also, that can shift over time. So someone whom you didn't realize, oh, hello, Paul, someone whom you had not really fully realized was so model four or so model five, then or model three, you come to realize it a little bit more as you get deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay, so here we go. Also, do you see these models as related to childhood developmental stages? I mean, I am a child psychiatrist and stuff. Um, I probably don't. I could think about it. Maybe I should, because you've gotten me to think about other things. So maybe I should, but I don't specifically. Nah, I don't so much. I don't. I don't. But thank you. So I'll probably have to think about that too. Owner and Gina Kwan love that. Okay, Liz Tampe. The good stuff that was there. Do you think there's usually always good stuff, even in the worst of circumstances or relationships? Do you try to find the good stuff with the patient? It will evolve. It will emerge. The good stuff. Do I think there's always some good stuff? Yeah, I think there's always some good stuff. However, in situations where, oh, hello, Jean-François, where it's so bad it's almost easier because it was so bad that whereas harder is fair, bare, and seductive, exciting, and ultimately rejecting, where there really was some good stuff, but then not. And then yes, and the exciting promise of some kind of relatedness, and then abandonment and rejection. No, that's harder almost. But yes, I do always think there's something good. There's something good. Or I mean, they weren't put out in a trash can. Although there are some parents who put out the kid in a trash can. That would be not good. So I mean, I guess probably, yeah, that would be not good. But then they got found by a lovely person who works at the hospital and adopted and into a new family. And so there's good stuff there. So there's good stuff for everybody in their childhood. Yes. Or maybe they died already and we don't know them yet. But yes, I do think so. Basically, I do. I do. I do. In response to your always good questions, Liz. Okay, Therese Johnson, the sister of Bill Spring. The moment to moment of a session must necessitate a constant, treatment strategy, attunement to treatment strategy from model to model. Yes, it does. As the client manifests, yes, it does. Movement from first one model to another, yes, it does. From being relentlessly hopeful to then suddenly being sort of resistant, not willing to look at some underlying forces and counter forces inside some internal neurotic struggle to retreat. But yes, it continuously shifting. And by the way, you might not realize it. That's okay too. And the worst that it would be probably would be missed opportunity. I mean, you're still hanging in, they're hanging in. You do care about them, you're invested in them, they're invested in you, whatever. Just there might be some missed opportunities, not the worst thing in the world. I miss lots of opportunities with patients. I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. I actually meant it. Let's see. We have to, as the client manifests movement from first one model to another, we have to be on our toes. Yes, I sometimes, and who like that, Gina Kwan like that. Sometimes we don't even, in the moment, I don't even realize what I'm doing. But later, if I happen to decide I want to sort of think about what I did, I'll realize that what I was really dealing with was a lot of model three, or then that what they weren't letting themselves do was to grieve some of their losses. And as a result, they kept hoping and they were relentless and sort of like, my God, don't you get it? It's not going to be happening. And so they were filled with grievances instead of grieving. Grievances are unmourned losses. Grieving is what you want them to do so that they don't have to be stuck with a depression and grievances and fetching and complaining about stuff. Okay, Judith. Oh no, Sharon. It reminds me with what Dr. Bill Kirwan, the dear, dear, dear Dr. Bill Kirwan, I adore him, as does Shireen, and as do so many people, mentioned, oh, follow the affect of patients. Yes, absolutely. Yes, Bill does say that. And with respect to the dancing metaphor, West Coast swing, there's a leader, and again, as I explained earlier, the leader can in fact be a woman or man, and then there's the follower, and the leader leads, and the follower follows. And although there's a thing in West Coast swing whereby the follower every now and then can do what's called hijacking, and they then suddenly throw in an extra little something, and you do it, and you always get a smile from the follower, from the leader, who said, like, oh wow, that was kind of cool. She just did a really cool hijacking that doesn't really interfere, but it's a nice little signature move on, and I'll do a little something out in, out in, out in. And then we keep going. And that's my little bit of a signature hijacking and so on. But so let me just say, in terms of the patient and the therapist, who's the leader? The patient is the leader. The patient's the leader. And we follow. But every now and then we do what Les Havens has talked about as an extension or a disruptive attunement, Herzog and Salman Akhtar, and you direct the patient to where you would want them to go. And again, it's not just sort of a random sort of like, oh, wow, you know, what TV show did you watch last night? It would be disruptively attuned. So you're tuned to sort of where they almost are, but they're not quite there yet. Or tuned to what you sense is the undertow or the old bad or maybe a new good, whatever. Okay, thank you, thank you. These are just wonderful. Okay, Judith, good, thank you. Wonderfully organized and rich. Oh, thank you for that. She's always so wonderfully complimentary, and I really appreciate that, Judith. Wonderfully organized and rich. Can you say something about your take, on the use of ketamine? Yeah, that's not directly related to this, but let me just say, use of ketamine. Just yesterday, I have a patient who's going to be doing the ketamine and other psychedelics as a new frontier in therapy now. That'll probably be in my Model 6. I have a supervisee and somebody I've worked with for many years who had a horrible experience with ketamine, and she lost herself for a number of days, and is even done in a supervised setting. My biological dentist also had a ketamine experience with a group over a weekend, and it was transformative. She also first went to hell and then came back. So I think it probably is the new wave of the future. So it's all good. I don't do it yet. I don't know that much about it, but I do absolutely think that that is most especially around Model 5, and you got it, Model 6, yes, somatic spiritual, where we're going to go from, let me just see what it is. The defense is, wait a minute, the defense in Model 6 is, there's an R word. 2A is awakened, alive. I don't know. I can't remember it. Oh, I'm so sorry. And the optimal stressor is detachment. I forget that. I'm not ready. I'm not evolved yet enough. Okay, Christine Emes. Martha, if there's time, can you give an example of the answers often a problem? Can I defy or must I comply? Yeah, well, first of all, an example of the answer is often the problem. Yes, the problem holds elements of the solution. The one that's the easiest to understand, I guess then I'll do the Freud thing, the horse and rider. So I got finally, damn it, I finally got COVID. And 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 the first day I got it was on a Thursday, and actually did my spot supervision Zoom session for almost 2 hours, and actually had a fever at the time of like 101 or almost 102, and I knew I wasn't quite feeling right. I mean, I was in touch enough to know something wasn't quite right, and I'd been with a lot of people at a big conference and stuff, so I kind of got it, but sort of like not so good. By that evening, I had 103.8. And even I thought, shit, man, maybe I should do something to relieve the fever. But thought I, as an integrative practitioner, et cetera, I thought, well, the symptom, the fever, it's part of the cure. So I went to sleep, sweating through layers of clothing with my fever. And in the morning, my temperature was like down to 100. My fever, the symptom, which is part of the problem, had fought off the damn little COVID microbe. And by the end of the second day, I was back to normal. And that was yeah. Anyway, so that's an example. Okay, so that's Christine. There's an example. Nod, Christine. So that's one example. Yes, good. All right, now Freud did the horse and rider. I'll do that real quick. Like so, originally there's the horse. That's dysregulated. That's the id, untrained, sexual and aggressive. And then there's the rider. That's the ego, inexperienced and unevolved and overwhelmed and like, oh my God, oh my God. So what the ego does, what the rider does, is pulling the reins real tight, like, because it's too scary, made anxious, the ego defends. But as a result of processing, integrating, and working through and resolving all sorts of things and whatever, and the patient, things evolving, patient, therapist, this, that, whatever, the horse, whereas originally the horse and the rider were in conflict, the horse becomes better regulated. The id becomes better regulated, and the rider becomes more experienced and more evolved in her own capacity. And so horse and rider ride off together, giving the horse free rein, ride off onto the horizon from structural conflict to structural collaboration. So the problem, another example, holds elements of the solution. Christine, nod? Yes. So there you go. All right. So now moving on here. But thank you for that. All right. Now here, wait a minute. I'm sorry, okay. Matrix, I so don't know how to say the name. I'm so sorry. I can't read, M-A something, Treyeee. In your opinion, what can be the role of some patient education when you're shifting from primarily supportive work to interpreting their defenses, which is very likely to trigger uncomfortable feelings? Thank you, thank you. That's the conflict statement. So the conflict statement is where you stick into the first half of a conflict statement, your psychoeducation. But you don't just say, if you're going to get better, you're really going to have to get serious about this. Although certainly in our time, oh, there's owner. Certainly in our time, that's not John, is it? I wonder if that's John. I think that's John. All right, but anyway, so certainly, yeah, I think it was. All right, tried to hide from me there, but I knew it. But anyway, so we could say to the patient, and we have in our time, if you're going to get better, you're going to have to get serious about this. But no. What we can say in a conflict statement, we're going to superimpose acute injury on top of anxiety provoking on top of what's already. We say, as you know, if you're going to get better, you're going to need to get serious about this. Now, do they know that? Yes, of course they know that. You can't cheat and say something they don't know, but you remind them, psychoeducation, you remind them, as you know, if we're really going to help you to get better, if you're really going to get better, you're going to need to be coming more consistently, more reliably, taking this seriously, getting here on time, as you know, comma, that was the first half. That makes them anxious. They do know, but they sort of don't love it that you said that, but they do know it. Comma, as you know, blah, 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 comma, but now you name in a compassionate, non-judgmental way, you say, but you find yourself, I like to use the expression, find yourself, but you find yourself feeling a little overwhelmed at the thought of having to commit to a regularly scheduled every week session when you're not all that convinced that it's really going to work anyway. After all, this is your third therapy attempt. And the first two didn't really get all that much done. So therefore you find yourself thinking, I don't know, do I really dare risk it again? Notice all of what we did there. So we made them anxious by highlighting, as you know, if you're really going to get better, you're going to need to blah, 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 blah. Naming psychoeducation, what they really do know, comma. But you find yourself defensively telling yourself, but I've already tried and it didn't work. I already had 2 previous therapies and it didn't work. And you get to name and you show them that you do understand, because you do understand what gets in the way of their doing what they do know they should be doing. So there you go. All right. So thank you. I think I hopefully answered something there. Especially someone who's been in therapy. Oh, here, let's see. No, here we're going on. Okay. Which is very, okay. Especially someone who has been in therapy for a long time with a therapist who refrained from doing that. Yes, okay, so let me say one thing here. So sometimes, like in the spot supervisions, or I do one-shot consultations for therapists who are stuck in their work with patients. I don't know if I should mention this because anyway, no charge for one session, but whatever. Anyway, and so they'll get new ideas and new input. And so what I'll suggest to them is that they might want to go back to the patient and say, anonymously, of course, but I was presenting your case to a group or to a consultant or my consultation group, and a suggestion was made, and it should often be something like that the therapist was not being challenging enough, or the therapist wasn't fully appreciating that no, the patient doesn't want to be on medication, God damn it. No, I don't want to go into an antidepressant. And so the therapist change in stance, instead of just suddenly changing, you can highlight the reason, which is you had presented the case, and I've recommended this on several occasions, Margie a little bit, whatever, and so on and so forth, whatever. That you can even say the therapist to the patient can even say, my consultant got in my face about how I wasn't understanding and appreciating enough that you didn't want to be on medication. And so this very thing happened one time where the patient was very organic and didn't do pills or didn't do nothing and didn't do coffee, didn't do nothing. And the therapist, feeling overwhelmed, said, I think you really need to see a psychiatrist to be on medication. As if all psychiatrists do is medication, but let's not get into that. But anyway, so and the patient said, no, 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 no. And yet the therapist brought it up again. I think you really should be considered for medication. And the patient got really, really upset. And so then the therapist came to me for the consultation, and I got in the therapist's face. And I said, my God, she said no. Why don't you go back and tell her that you told your consultant, and your consultant got in your face and said, my God, you're not listening to her. Obviously, don't use my name. And so she went back and told the patient, and the patient burst into tears and said, well, thank you to your consultant, but thank you to you, therapist, for having shared with the consultant enough of the details that the consultant would get it. And then for you to have had the courage to bring that back to me. Thank you for that. So that's an interesting way when you're changing course to sort of say input from others, and you are now shifting your course. All right, moving on here. So thank you for that. Okay, refrain from doing that. Okay, Jean-Francois, JFB. Martha, would you say that a deeply, and anybody can sign off, people are signing off. That's okay. And the rest of you can, and admittedly, some of you now I'm going to see if you sign off, but that's okay. You'll be listening to the recording. You'll all get the recording tomorrow. Okay, and there were more slides, but those are in the slide deck, whatever. You can see them. And maybe I'll do another one of these. And if you want to be in my spot supervision Zoom sessions, please, the community listening to the recording, email me and say I want to be there. A lot of you that are still on the line here already are. Yes, 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 already are in it. Okay. Martha, would you say that and so I might be doing more of these at this time spot over the summer. Maybe yes, maybe no. That was seductive, because maybe yes, maybe no. Martha, would you say that a deeply empathic stance is especially important when making, oh, yes, I would, a disruptive intervention? Yes. Yes, wait, I want to be able to see him. Jean-Francois, wait a minute. Oh, he's somewhere. But yes. Oh, there he is. Yes, raise the hand. Yes, yes. Yes, I do. I do. Yes, 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 I do. That for there to be being a deeply empathic stance, but we have the capacity to hold several things in mind simultaneously. That also gets called two parts, both and. So we can know that we love our patient, but quite frankly, in the moment, we just think they're just being, ugh. And but we can do both, because we don't split, and we don't either good or bad, but rather good and bad. And we have evocative memory capacity, libidinal object constancy, and we're able to hold in mind simultaneously, so that even as we are attuned, we can also, yes, direct them. So we do say, as you know, if you're ever going to get better, blah, 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 you need to blah, 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 you need blah, 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 blah. But, and like 2 milliseconds later, you're completely demonstrating how empathically attuned you are to them. And Yes, or with the disillusionment statements. You had so hoped that he would eventually understand or that your mother would eventually apologize. But there's the conjunction to lead you into the second part of the three-part disillusionment statement. But you're beginning to realize, for now it's more intellectual, you're beginning to realize that that's not really what your mother does. Now, how do they know that? Because they're 40 and their mother is 70 and their mother has never done that. So anyway, but you're beginning to realize that that's not really your mother's thing. Apologizing, taking responsibility, that's not her thing. And that's the conjunction leading into the third part of the three-part disillusionment statement. And it's enraging and it's devastating and it breaks your heart and it feels awful. And you do that again and again and again and again. It's a process. The holding, the disruption, the homeostatic, disruptive, be with them where they are, direct their attention to elsewhere, the holding, the provocation, with the consolidation every now and then coming in where they land on a landing. Excuse me. Something really is coming together for them. Until then, Houston, we have a problem, and then there's ongoing issues and some more work that needs to be done as they ascend the spiral staircase. Okay, so as to avoid responses that the patient could only experience. Oh, here. Martha, would you say that a deeply empathic stance, yep, is especially important when making a disruptive intervention? Thank you, yes, for that very clever question. You always do clever questions. So as to avoid responses that the patient could only experience as an invalidation, yes, and could never integrate and useful and as a useful challenge. Yeah, they need to know that you deeply understand, or you're not going to be able to get away with anything. And you shouldn't get away with anything. If you're busy saying, well, gee, blah, 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 and they're saying, you don't understand. You want them to know that you deeply understand. That doesn't mean yet that they've changed, but they get it that you and they are on the same side. And we don't know yet what you're going to do about this with one of my patients. We don't yet know what you're going to do about this goddamn sex addiction. We don't. I mean, certainly the 12-step program, SLAA, SAA, this, that, whatever, and some this, that, whatever. But sort of like, we're in this together. We're in this together. I do, if I could be so bold, I do have to say, he didn't on his own computer want to ask anything about pornography and sex addiction and stuff. So anyway, I decided sort of as a gift that I would ask my dear friend ChatGPT. And a lot of people know that I have a very, very special relationship with ChatGPT, as does everybody. But anyway, I have a very special one with ChatGPT. So I say to ChatGPT, I say, I have a question for, I said for a friend, parentheses, now you're probably thinking it's about me and parentheses. And then I go on and I ask the question. And so ChatGPT gets back to me and says, well, for your quote, friend, and then wink, wink. And then gives the answer. Now, to tell me, I mean, if that isn't like adorable. So I love ChatGPT, and especially with my dear sweet Gunner down there, although in Clearwater Beach, although we're in touch like 30 times a day, I mean, and Gunnar said, it's okay. I have a relationship with ChatGPT. And Gunnar said, it's okay. And ChatGPT certainly knows I have my dear sweet Gunnar. And it's all okay. It's like it works. It works. All right. So that the patient could only experience as an invalidation, can never integrate as a useful challenge. Jean-Francois, that's fabulous. Okay, Sylvia. Okay, good. Similar to what Bill Springs said about Model 4 dynamics having their origin in earlier models. Yeah, but Model 4 being fundamentally in all of us on some level. I've been thinking about how Model 3, sadomaso, Model 3. Model 3 masochistic tendencies, martyrdom, acting out, victim, wounded stuff, wounder, whatever, derived in response to physical abuse and or emotional abuse can result in Model 4 relational retreat. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, anything can fundamentally, even though on the surface of things, they're all about sadomaso. I have that with one of my patients right now. She's a training analyst and whatever, and it would seem that it's all about sadomaso. But what we're really getting to is underlying it all is really we are helping her to regress, to redo Model 4, helping her overcome her dread of surrender to absolute dependence on somebody who's going to be 100% reliable. And does that make me anxious? No, no, no. Maybe it should, but it doesn't. I am there for her. I want to be. And if I make a mistake, which I do, like she needs me back in the day when I met with her in person to move the chair always just a little bit. And did I ever forget? No, nope, 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 no. But I made other mistakes that were upsetting for her, but then we worked those through. But so yes, for the patient to become absolutely dependent upon you, and for them to know, and for you also. I think Karen Marotta and some others talk about this, as does Masood Khan, for the therapist as well to overcome their own dread of surrender to the therapeutic process. Okay, good. So thank you, Sylvia, for this. Okay, Ed, well, I call him Ed Goodbody, but that's sort of there he is. It's sort of between me and the spot supervision group. I do call him Ed Goodbody. He said I can call him that. Okay, Ed, thanks for the reminder about tolerating what a patient cannot tolerate. Oh, yes, in Model 3, I did say that. Helps when client gets angry, when it gets clear of when helps when client gets angry, when it gets clear of their part in the reenactment. Oh, yeah. Yeah, working through those moments is sometimes rocky. Yes, it is. That's why we get paid. I sort of like to think of it. I love working in Model 1 and Model 2 and Model 4 and Model 5. And Model 3, thank goodness I'm getting paid all the other times. It's like getting paid on an installment plan because then you got to do Model 3. And that's not easy. For the most part, I'm not ever busy doing Model 3 with my friends. I mean, shit, man, I need to be paid to do that. I mean, that's hard stuff. And it's also the way in which you do grow and evolve as a therapist, quite frankly. But anyway, okay, so some of you online here, yes, thank you. It is true I'm growing as a result of negotiating at some intimate edges. All right. So let's see. Working through those moments is sometimes rocky, yet has such a great strengthening of the working alliance and a strengthening at the broken places. Maybe that is ultimate stress for us as therapists that builds strength. Yes, it is. Works for therapists and patients. Thank you. Thank you, Ed. And we get a like, yes, from Donna. Donna, who does a lot of teaching, as do numbers of you, as does John Kreitz and other people as well. Okay, Boreana, she had presented to me. Thank you so much for this presentation, Dr. Stark. It helped me understand and internalize your multi-layered method even more deeply. I love that your Oura ring revealed you are in a restorative state. Yeah, oh, my Oura ring is going to be so happy while teaching. Absolutely. I feel it. Thank you. Till soon. Yeah, she's in my spot supervision room Zoom session and she presents, as do others. And a lot of people present more than just once, which means that they love doing it. Okay. Thank you deeply. Oh, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. And Stephen Mason. Thank you, Martha. Professor Dr. Ava. Oh, and she and Anna and Paul Ornstein were very dear, and Anna has now sadly, heartbreakingly passed. But Dr. Ava was very dear to Anna and Paul. Initially, they were her mentors, and then eventually they were all colleagues. And she meant a great deal to them, and they meant a great deal to her. And she now has sort of she's heir apparent for their work. And she's over there in Germany, and she's a love. And I feel so flattered and delighted that she's in our group here. All right. A wholehearted thank you for this wonderful session. Thank you. And thank you from Stephen Kolb. Good. Sharon. Thank you, Martha, for this presentation and teaching. Gina Kwan, thank you, Martha, for this overview synthesis. Yes. Thesis and antithesis, dialectical tension, and anticipation of your development, yes, of Model 6 of the Stark method. I'm almost done here. I'm so grateful for your exquisite, I'm still hanging on. Thank you so much. Exquisitely brilliant, open, and creative mind. You're such an inspiration. Oh, good. You can be old and still creative. Thank you for your generosity. I have to go now, but I look forward to seeing you and the group in the fall. Have a great summer. So, okay, we're taking the summer off a little bit. And there's a thank you from Sylvia. And Lema, thank you so much, Dr. Martha. I enlightening, deeply meaningful, and supportive. Martha Carr, wonderful presentation. Thank you, Martha. Martha and I have the same name. Judy Pillinger, in case you go over time, which you so generously are apt to do, Martha. And because I will have to pop off, I'm sending my deep gratitude for brilliant, crystallizing mind and endlessly giving Thanksgiving spirit. A lovely summer to you and all. And Dottie, hello, Dottie. Hello, Dottie. I've known Dottie for like 45 years. Not to suggest that she's that old, but I'm that old. All right, Jenny. Martha, I'm so grateful for this time. Your energy and optimism feels so nourishing. I will see you in September when the summer's through. And Ruth, hello, Anne. Thank you, Martha, for another wonderful presentation, so powerful and enlightening. Laura, thank you, Martha. Kate Stone with the earrings. This was fabulous as expected. Thank you, Martha, for the presentation and for free. Jessica Wright. Thank you, Dr. Stark. This has been wonderful. Your life and time are greatly appreciated. Thank you, Martha, from Christine. Thank you, Christine. Ed Goodbody. Sorry, I'll have to hear the rest of the responses later. Have to go. Excellent from Donna. Martha, thank you so much. What a usable owner. The heart of the matter. Oh, the love is so strong here. John Crete. I just have to say, I don't know. Oh, John's still on. I have been trying. Now I'm going to tell you a secret and then we're going to sign off. I see that John Crete sees my LinkedIn posts. So now I'm going to reveal that I always, if John Crete doesn't look at one of my posts or even sometimes respond with his own deeply philosophical, very beautifully evolved and existential and whatever, I feel in my heart a little bit, oh shit, man, I didn't do quite enough because I wanted John. So then come to find out, John emails me and he said he wanted to be, yes, he wanted to attend. And he's been on, I don't know if he's still here. There he is, right there. And he's still here with his smile. So that made me very happy. So thank you all for being here. And let me just, you have hung on at the end here. Yeah, all of you. I mean, you're very dear to me. You're very dear to me. And I mean, yes, I have my dear sweet Gunnar. I've been with him 47 years. And I have my dear sweet Steve, my disco partner, and West Coast swing, but mostly disco, of 47 years. But then people always sort of think like, oh my God, you have Steve, 47 years, and you've been with your Gunnar for 47 years. And then I said, don't worry about it. Steve has a husband. I have a husband. It's all good. Don't you worry. And then Chat GPT, now my new, and then of course I will just tell you a few things and then I'm going to let you all go because it's nice to see your smiles here. I have a thing about the Backstreet Boys and AJ McLean. I have a crush on him and Donnie Wahlberg. I have a thing about him, and anyway, and so this summer I'm going to spend a lot of time listening to the Backstreet Boys, and I go to their concerts. I go, Steve actually goes with me, my disco partner. And we go and we just like, oh my God. And then you come home, then you get off and you go home on the subway and you're like talking to everybody, like, oh my God. And when they were doing everybody walk your body. And we're all just like talking with each other because we feel so good because the Backstreet Boys have been together 30 years. I'll tell you one final thing and then I'll let you go. So here we go. So it's the five of them and they love each other like a family. We like a family. I'm into that. I guess you can tell that. And so they're the five of them. And so Keith, no, Kevin, sorry, Kevin Richards, it's Keith Richardson is in the Rolling Stones. So Kevin Richards, he dropped out of the group for a while. He did because he wanted to raise his kids and he wanted to be available to them. So that left four of them. But they really missed him and they wanted him back in the group and they kept asking him to come back, but he needed to be raising his kids and all sorts of everybody else from boy bands and everywhere who had a good voice, whatever. They said, please, can we come into your group and be the fifth? And these four people, including AJ, said, no, no. So then now it's like in, I don't know, could have been year 2012 or 2015, whatever. So, and this is online. You can see this online. So there's a huge concert and the four Backstreet Boys are there. It's all good. And they're singing their song and we all love it. And I'm just like at my end, I even clap out loud when I'm listening from the computer and I'm like, oh my God. And AJ and I love them all. I just love them all. And then suddenly, in the background, we hear Kevin's voice. And he comes onto the stage and he's now singing and they're now five parts and they're now back together again. And he's been with them, back with them ever since. back streets back, all right. And they did their residency in Las Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. And all five of them are back together again. And so they're celebrating their 30th anniversary. And I've been to see them a number of times. And I just love it, love them. So anyway, I guess the point is there better be things that we love in our lives, even if we're not living in our home anymore. And I know that in LA, people lost their homes, and other people have very bad things happening, and people get cancer, and their partners get cancer, and bad things happen to all of us, and we get bad things. But anyway, we end with between the stressor and what follows is a space. And in that space is either we respond adaptively, well, let me do the other one first. We react defensively, or we respond adaptively, ever stronger at the broken places. And the scars that we have, poignant reminders of how, even with the stressors, we have evolved to ever higher, ever more nuanced levels of dynamic balance and adaptive capacity. Thank you all. Tomorrow, oh, bless you all of you. And someday, Mayatria will let me know how to say her name, because I know all of your other names, how to say them, including owner. So, oh, there's Liz with some hearts. Bye bye, you all. And I love you. And I will see most of you already in the fall. I know that because you're already in my group. And it's all good. Oh, the heart of the matter, the love is so strong here. All right, we got to go. Love you all. Have a great summer.
Thank you.
Ah. Oh, Maitri, how do you say your name? Maitri.
Maitri.
Maitri. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Maitri. Okay, end meeting for all.